Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We know this is at a busy time of year, and we truly appreciate your time. I specifically want to give a special welcome to members of our 1811 Society and our Phillips Society. You are vital parts of our community. My name is Krista McCabe-Cruz, and I have the great privilege of overseeing fundraising efforts for Mass General. I am one of the fortunate people in life who happens to love what they do for a living, and I can't express how thrilled I am to be emceeing this event representing leadership from the Development Office. I know many of you are used to seeing Britt Nicholson here in this role, and he retired. So I hope he's doing something fantastic tonight. So I'm representing him in the best way I can. But he sends his regards. I've been asked to share some of our MGH unrestricted fundraising totals with you, and I don't need to remind you that this is the most valuable money for our hospital. In FY23, the MGH Fund raised $14.3 million, and so far in FY25, we have raised nearly $19 million in unrestricted funding across the academic medical centers, 13.5 which have come from Mass General donors, many of whom are in this room tonight. To note, we have till October 1st to reach our $26 million goal across the academic medical centers. As many of you know, our hospital has been undergoing integration to help create unified coordination for our patients and their families, and we're hoping you're already beginning to start to feel some of those efficiencies. Our efforts have included appointing singular leaders for clinical departments and establishing 3 institutes to focus on the areas of cancer, neuroscience, and heart and vascular. The program tonight will give you an opportunity to hear more about the Heart and Vascular Institute and how our integrated approach will bring together the greatest minds in the field and, most importantly, transform care and improve access for our patients and their families. Tonight you will hear directly from Patrick Ellinor, who happens to be a dear friend of mine. I've been fundraising for him for longer than I can remember, who is the inaugural executive director of our MGB Heart and Vascular Institute. Patrick will be joined by Sawalla Guseh, director of the Cardiovascular Performance Program, and Antonia Kreso, a cardiothoracic surgeon. However, before we get into the heart, pun intended, of the program, I have the great pleasure of introducing the president of Mass General Hospital, Dr. Marcela del Carmen, who will share a few institutional updates with you and then formally introduce our speaker. With that, I am pleased to introduce Marcela del Carmen.
Thank you, Krista. And I am Latin and a little bit jealous, and so I'm very sad that you didn't say that I was also a close friend of yours. I'm just going to make sure that the minutes reflect that twice. So it's a real privilege to be here in front of you. I want to thank you for making the time to come here, and I want to thank you most of all for believing in the Mass General and believing in our mission and being able to literally put dollars in your beliefs. Like, your commitment and your gifts to the hospital are what allows us to be standing in front of you today, and it has allowed us to continue to be committed to mission. It is clear to all of us in the room, I hope, that we are facing some incredible challenges in healthcare and in the delivery of healthcare, I would say in the United States, but also globally. Coming out of the pandemic, there are challenges that are existential to the continued existence of our mission. I want to spend a little bit of time explaining to you that our mission is actually centered in 4 pillars. Many academic medical centers have 3 pillars. They have a commitment to clinical care and excellence in delivering care to our patients. They have a commitment to research and to continue to innovate and create an experience of research-informed care for patients. And they have a commitment to educating the next generation of clinicians. We have a 4th pillar at Mass General Brigham that is continuing to serve the communities where we sit. And it has never been harder to deliver healthcare because of the challenges that we're facing. And I think for us to be able to continue to commit to all 4 pillars of our mission, we will need your help more than ever. Unrestricted funding and unrestricted gifts allow us to have flexibility around how we can support our mission, support our clinicians, support our researchers, our learners, and also support the communities that we serve. I want to spend just a minute sharing with you my personal story. I came to the MGH in 1999 to train as a fellow in GYN oncology. So I'm a surgeon by training. And I came to the Mass General from Hopkins. So the only 2 places that I've ever spent any time providing care and training have been Hopkins and the Mass General. So I was very committed to a career in academic medicine. But as you think about a young faculty member, somebody has to believe in you and somebody has to give you funding to actually be able to start your research career. And I would not be here in front of you today as a professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive biology, the first woman and the first person of color to actually ascend to that rank at Harvard Medical School in my field, if it wasn't because I had a grateful patient that gave me unrestricted funding to start my research career. As all of you know, at Harvard Medical School, you cannot get promoted unless it's through scholarship. Even if you're a great clinician, even if you're a great educator, it is hard to get promoted unless you've actually shown and demonstrated through scholarship and research that you've actually transformed your field. So I want to impress upon you that, again, unrestricted funding has never been more relevant or important. Our ability to be here for the next 250 years will be contingent on our ability to protect mission. When you look at what is happening in our own environment, when Tufts had to make the tough decision to close their floating hospital for children, it's not because they didn't want to provide care for children. It's not because there are no sick children in the city or children that need to be cared for, but they simply couldn't afford to do it, and so they had to step away from mission. We are committed to actually doubling down on our 4 pillars and our mission, but our ability to do that is contingent on our ability to be financially sustainable and being able to provide the support that our researchers need to innovate and create a clinical experience for patients that continues to change and transform medicine. As many of you saw on your drive over, we now are in the middle of our Reagan building and the project of building 2 huge towers. One will house cancer, and the other one will house heart, vascular, and cardiac surgery. Those towers will unlock our campus. It will allow us to deliver care, to actually do research and train the next generation of healthcare providers in the same space. Our ability to actually be able to support the building of those towers, which I think is the most important building since the Bullfinch building, would not be true if it wasn't for the generosity of everyone in this room. And so we are grateful for your generosity. We are committed to not only reimagining medicine, but to make sure that we are here for the next 200 years. I'm from Nicaragua originally, so I came to the United States when I was 10. And I'm incredibly proud to live in a city that actually started the American Revolution. And we are revolutionizing medicine. You will see when I bring the speakers, or I introduce your speakers, how they each have created an opportunity that has revolutionized the way that they deliver care in their own specialties. I think the Reagan building is another way in which we're going to revolutionize the way that we deliver care. But I want to underscore what I said at the beginning and throughout my comments, that our ability to do that and to actually stay in the cutting edge of medicine and healthcare delivery has never mattered more, and it's never been more contingent than now on the generosity of our of people like you that believe in our mission and believe in what we're here to do. I want to now introduce Dr. Patrick Ellinor, who's the inaugural executive director of the Mass General Brigham Heart and Vascular Institute. I've had the privilege of working with Patrick, and he is a very unique leader. He lives the lived experience. He continues to practice medicine. He's a world-renowned researcher, a world-renowned educator, and brings vision to Mass General Brigham and to the delivery of care that we are putting together, where we're going to leave no one behind and we're going to create better access for our patients. He's going to be joined by Dr. Sawalla Guseh, who's director of the Cardiovascular Performance Program, and also Dr. Antonia Kreso, who's cardiothoracic surgeon. In Patrick's new role, he's as the inaugural executive director, he again is creating a vision for delivering cardiovascular medicine, how we train the next generation of providers, and how we actually continue to provide research-informed care and serve our communities under a single institute. So again, I want to thank you for his leadership, and without any further ado, I'll invite Patrick to the podium.
Thank you, Marcela, for that very kind introduction. And it's great to see so many old friends and colleagues this evening. You know, I thought I would just start with a bit of a story. You've heard a lot of integration across Mass General and the Brigham, and I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering why. Why are we doing this? I've grown up in our system. I started at the Brigham as a resident. I moved all the way across town to MGH in 1998, and I've been at MGH until I took on this new role. But I thought I'd start with just a simple story, something that I think many of you have encountered in your own lives. And this is about an elderly gentleman who lives in suburban Boston, who's gotten all of his care inside our system. All of his care has been at Newton Wellesley, part of our system for the last 30 years, and received and came down just with a diagnosis of heart failure, was seen by his cardiologist, and had a perfectly routine thing, was asked to get an echo. They said, went out to the checkout desk and was told, sure, we can get you an echo, but it'll be about 2 months here. Here's a piece of paper, here are the other labs. And you can call around and you can try and get that echo, and maybe there'll be a slot a little sooner. So that elderly gentleman is 84 years young. Fortunately, he's sharp as a tack. He lives in Sudbury, and he's my father-in-law. And so needless to say, we expedited his echo. And that wasn't something from 30 years ago. That was from March, okay? So if you wonder why we're trying to bring our system together, it's for Mort and all of the other Morts out there, and for each of you in the audience, to try to provide a more seamless experience. He shouldn't have to try and figure out how to order an echo. He should be able to just walk out to the front desk. They should be able to say, we see you live in Sudbury. The closest location is here. Or we see that you're a docent at the MFA. Maybe you want to come and have it done at the Brigham when you're next door to the Brigham. That's the way we should be providing care. For those who are tech savvy, you should be able to look it up on your phone and say, I'm going to be here, and there's a slot that's in Framingham, and I want to get it there tomorrow, if a slot pops open. So for me, it's personal. I want to take, you're going to meet two superstars in just a minute. We have the very, very best people. We have the most talented physicians. You've met many of them in your lives. We have incredibly talented nurses, nurse practitioners, everybody across our system. Really world class. Educators, researchers. What we want to do is make that experience more seamless for each and every one of you. So a bit about who we are. The most common question I get is, what's the Heart and Vascular Institute? With that as that story as a backdrop, what we're doing is bringing together cardiology, vascular surgery, and cardiac surgery under a common framework, so that you shouldn't have to figure out if your vascular problem needs to be seen by someone in vascular medicine or vascular surgery. You can call us, and we'll help you figure out that and navigate our system. We're built on an incredible base. That history of patient care, for those who are not familiar with it, this is the Brigham campus. This is 15 Francis Street. And this is, in the middle is Dr. Cutler. Dr. Cutler did the very first cardiac surgery ever done, which is to open up a mitral valve that was stenotic. And then Dr. Braunwald, who is one of the pioneers in clinical research at Brigham and Women's Hospital. That's complemented by our own leaders. These are contemporaries. The Bullfinch building, obviously out front, where ether was first used as an anesthetic. And then in the middle, many of us were well familiar with Dr. Roman De Sanctis, one of the teachers that I came to learn from when I first got here in the late 90s. And then Paul Dudley White, a contemporary of Dr. Cutler's. Paul Dudley White brought an EKG machine, the first commercial EKG machine, to the United States and set it up in the basement of the Bullfinch building. And that's where our fellows room was in 1998, was that room where there are pictures of that EKG machine first being used. Well, we've come a little ways. This is now where we are. This is a map of heart and vascular care across New England and across the sites that are actually just Mass General Brigham. So there are more than 40 of these sites. And if you take and say, here are the clinics that we go to where we provide additional care outside of our system, you would double it, and you'd be up in the 80s or 90s for individual locations. So we have a footprint throughout New England. And part of that navigation is to make it easier to get to the right place wherever you live. Our two community hospital, or two academic medical centers, rather. You're well familiar with MGH and the Brigham, but we're also a network of 7 community hospitals, some large, some small, whether in Newton, Cooley Dickinson, or Salem, Wentworth Douglas up in Dover, and then obviously on the islands as well. But each of those hospitals has a huge footprint of their own. They have anywhere from 4 to 6 different clinic sites that are all mapped out onto that site in New England. So for example, at Mass General, I think we're well familiar with, Danvers, Stoneham, Waltham, Chelsea, and Revere. Those are clinics that are run out of Mass General, but there's the same parallel at Newton Wellesley where you could be in Chestnut Hill, Needham, or Wellesley. So there are sites of service all over. A little bit about who we are. Last year, so from October to October in a fiscal year, we saw nearly 350,000 patient visits. That was 74,000 new patient visits. If any of you live in Newton or Brookline, that's more visits in a single year for new patients than exist in your entire town. That's like seeing your town each year. So it's a staggering footprint of patient care. More than 24,000 EP or cath procedures, 7,000 surgeries, and across each of these different sites that you saw just a moment ago. Well, as Dr. Del Carmen mentioned, it's not just about the clinical care. We also have an incredible footprint on education, on research, and then in caring for those across our entire community. I love this slide because to just illustrate the research impact, if I have to do it in one slide, I thought this was a fun one. What this is a map of a clinical trial. So this was started by Dr. Braunwald back here, July 1984. This was the first of what's called the TIMI trials. That was a trial to determine if a clot-busting drug was helpful for heart attack. In the mid-'80s, that was not clear. Should you get a clot-busting drug like TPA, streptokinase? This was streptokinase at the time. These days, we put in stents right away. If you come in, you have a stent put in. Each one of these, this little line, or this line, or this line, is thousands of patients that either received that therapy or didn't receive that therapy. Each of these studies, when they came out, had an immediate impact on clinical care. Published in leading journals, the New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet, JAMA. And we're not quite up to 100 yet, but this is just the impact. Imagine this, thousands of patients for every single line that I'm showing you, and we're determining the fate of modern cardiac care on this slide. And it continues. This research group is very busy, and folks work in it, although it's based on the Brigham campus, investigators go back and forth between this campus and the Brigham. So it's a remarkable impact. Not only locally, but across the entire world. A key part of our mission, you're going to see Dr. Guseh in a moment, this is where he's leading rounds with some of our fellows. At any given moment, we have more than 130 trainees in cardiology, cardiac surgery, vascular surgery in 16 different programs. And we're in the process of bringing those together to have a more seamless educational experience. What challenges do we face? Well, you heard some of them, the logistics. I'd say it's difficult to navigate our system. Hopefully, it's been a seamless experience for all of you in the audience. I'm sure none of you have ever had trouble reaching us, scheduling a test or an appointment. I'll take the fifth on that. No need to, we know. This was actually just a survey of our patients, and that's the work we have to do to tackle it and make this easier. We also face some broader challenges. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in the entire world. It's not an infectious disease, it's not cancer. You put every cancer together, and you're still at about the same frequency as all of heart disease. We learned in COVID that it's a challenge to maintain and retain our staff. We need more people, and then there are huge capacity challenges, both in the outpatient and in the inpatient sphere. Do we have hope to the future? Absolutely. Pharmacologic interventions. You've heard of GLP-1s and the effect that they're having and the impact on obesity. These drugs may single-handedly bring down the burden of cardiovascular disease. We're trying quite hard to deliver the best care locally that we possibly can. We know how hard it is to get through the Leverett Circle or into Longwood. Sometimes that can take as long as your visit. So getting you to a place where we can take care of you with the same doctors, the same teams, but closer to home is going to be a huge improvement. And then obviously there's huge room for technology. You've probably seen, hopefully in visits recently, that your doctors are using AI to help transcribe notes so that they can face you and chat with each of you rather than sit and face a computer and type away at it as they've had to do for the last 10 or 15 years. So what's our vision for the Heart and Vascular Institute? I've given you the background, a little vignette about a patient. I've given you some of the places we've made an impact, but what we want to do is simple. It's to be the global leader in cardiovascular care and to lead in all of the areas, whether it's groundbreaking research, education, and most importantly, the care of each and every one of you. So the best part of my job, and I think we're well on our way. We're starting. We're about 6 or 8 months in, but when you start with an incredible base, what we're doing is to try and connect people and patients and physicians more seamlessly. But the best part of my job is actually working with the future stars. These are the folks that are going to take care of us as we get older, and we're going to meet 2 of them this evening. Sawalla Guseh, who directs our Cardiovascular Performance Program, or a sports cardiologist, and then Dr. Antonia Kreso, a cardiothoracic surgeon. So Sawalla, can I turn to you?
Thank you, Patrick. Good evening. It's nice to see all these shining faces. Oh my gosh, Dr. Bazari, I didn't see you. Dr. Bazari was my program director, actually. And my first surgery when I was a medical student at Harvard Medical School was with Dr. Del Carmen. She probably remembers that. And Patrick was my first step-down attending. oh no. Let's see, I will get started. Am I going the right direction? We'll skip it. Oh, there we are. All right. I'll get started. My name is Sawalla Guseh. This seems like a fun crowd. So maybe I'll share. Sawalla is West African. It means big elephant, which took some time to get used to. But now that we've gotten the elephant out of the room, I'll get started. I'm going to tell you 3 brief stories. I'll talk a little bit about sports cardiology, because a lot of people are like, what is sports cardiology? And then I want to tell you about fitness quantified, this emerging number called VO2 max that we think is critical to health, and we consider the 5th vital sign. And then I'll end with a story about electrocardiogram and how we're using AI to sort of reimagine a very old tool, the EKG, and how we think it could help take care of patients and take care of our community. And so, sports cardiology. The last couple of years in sports cardiology have been pretty interesting. Many of you might recognize Damar Hamlin a couple of years ago had a sudden cardiac arrest on the field on a Monday night football game. And his story and others sort of taught us about the importance of CPR, of AEDs, of recognizing cardiac arrests. But we know it doesn't just happen in football, it happens in other sports. This is the Danish number 10, fantastic player, Christian Eriksen, who had a sudden cardiac arrest on the pitch, resuscitated on the field, and is playing today, and quite well, I might say. And then you have Bronny James a couple years ago, the son of the great LeBron James, had a cardiac arrest at basketball practice in Southern California. Had congenital heart disease repaired, now doing quite well, playing professionally. But these stories and others sort of remind us that you can be incredibly fit. You can do everything right. You can eat right. You can sleep right. But no level of fitness really makes you completely immune from heart disease. And so this is why, at the Mass General 16 years ago, we created the Cardiovascular Performance Program. We are the oldest, first, and largest sports cardiology program in these United States and in the world. We started 16 years ago, and we take care of active patients and athletes of all kinds. People often ask, what kind of patients do you see? We sort of see 3 buckets of patients. The first are competitive athletes, so they can be Olympians, professional athletes, collegiate athletes. We're also seeing more and more tactical athletes, that's police, military, and fire. And then we see recreational athletes, people that just, it's a part of their life, moving is a part of their life, and they want to focus on moving well and aging well. We support nearly 40 high schools across the greater Boston area. We care for nearly every professional team in Boston. And very recently, we started taking care of the professional women's hockey team, the Boston Fleet, Go Fleet. And so we're very much like that we care for our community. The late Roman DeSanctis taught me that doctor comes from the Latin to teach, and that's embedded in our program. 16 years ago, our founders, Aaron Baggish, Dolph Hutter, had the foresight to start a training program, the first training program in these United States. And since then, we've trained over a dozen sports cardiologists, all out of the Yaki building here at Mass General. And now they've gone across the United States and Canada, and they're leading programs, caring for teams. And we've essentially given birth to a brand new field of sports cardiology. And although the principles of taking care of an athlete, you might think, okay, maybe I'm not an athlete. You think the principles only apply to athletes, but we actually have learned that the same principles that we use to take care of, runners, marathoners, football players, apply to all of us. And I'll talk about one of those metrics that we think is critical, VO2 max and health. And we think a lot about exercise science and sports science in our program, but it really translates to everyone. We see people as young as 14 years old to 94 years old, and these principles apply. And so I always like to start with this London bus, because modern day exercise science started here on a London bus, and the London bus study started in the 1940s, and it was an ingenious natural experiment. There are 2 employees on this bus. There's a driver down in the bottom that drives the bus, and then there's a conductor, takes your ticket, goes up and down the stairs, gives tickets to folks. The bus driver sits for about 90% of the shift. In contrast, the conductor is climbing like 600 stairs a day. And we ultimately learned that the drivers had a 50% higher rate of heart attacks and double the rate of sudden cardiac death. And so we ultimately learned that sitting, I see you guys are all sitting for too long is harmful, but exercise is undeniably good and healthy for you. And so there's a bit of a distinction between exercising and being fit. They're related, but slightly distinct. So exercising is like studying for a test, and your fitness is how well you do on that test. And so we tell everybody to exercise because that's the best thing you can do. But fitness, as we define it, is this number called VO2 max. It's how much oxygen you can consume at peak effort. And most of us here have VO2 maxes, this number, in the 20s to 30s. If you're a marathoner or a triathlete, you're probably in the 40s to 50s. We know the top 1% of men are over 65. The top 1% of women are over 55, and men are 65. When you have really severe heart disease, such that you're on the transplant list, we know that your number gets really low. You're under 14. And how do we measure this, you might ask? And so we bring you in to our exercise lab, and this is a future Olympian. We bring you in our exercise lab, and we give you a mask, and then you can decide. You can ride a bicycle, you can row a rowing machine, you can get on the treadmill, and we're going to measure how much oxygen you're consuming until you hit to peak effort. And this is a nice example of it. It's someone on a bike, and they're doing more and more and more work until they hit some peak, and this person has a peak VO2 or a VO2 max of 50. Fantastic athlete. Just for context, Eliud Kipchoge, world record holder, won London Marathon, broke 2, has a VO2 of about 70. When we started having the Women's Olympic Marathon in 1984 Olympics, Joan Samuelson won that marathon, and she had a VO2 max of 79. Incredible. Lance Armstrong, American cyclist, Tour de France winner, asterisk, has a VO2 max of 84. It's a hard number to get to. And why do we care about it? We care about it because it's been shown consistently, like pretty much every single study. The higher that number, The lower your risk of death, the lower your risk of heart attack, the higher the number. Interestingly, we don't fully understand it, the lower your risk of cancer. And once you get that cancer, you're more likely to beat it the higher the number. So it's this remarkable number that translates across multiple studies to predict health. This is why your Apple Watch, your Garmin, your Fitbit, they probably have, some of them, like, you don't even know it's measuring this, but it's trying to estimate your VO2 max on those devices. This is why a lot of insurance companies want to get a sense of your fitness. You know, they care about how well you're going to do for different reasons. This is why we think that Olympians, in general, live about 3 years longer than the rest of us. And not only do they live longer, but they live longer free of disease, this concept of health span. They have this compressed time where they're actually sick. And so this is why we think that VO2 max, or fitness in general, should be considered a vital sign. And this is why we tell you to exercise, because if you don't, in general, after the age of 30, you start to lose 1% of your VO2 max each year. And so we believe that this is a number that doesn't just matter for athletes, but it's a number that should be measured, monitored, and to the extent that you can, maximized. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're using AI in the ECG to study a little bit about VO2 max and to extract it from new places. Patrick talked a little bit about our first chief of cardiology at the Mass General, Paul Dudley White. He brought the EKG over from Europe, brought it to the Mass General basement. Now we have ECGs in the United States. Everyone's probably had one. It's a 10-second snapshot, electrical signature of your heart. When we screen collegiate athletes, we were always struck by the fact that, you know, you could look at the golf team, then the football team, and then the basketball team. And the EKGs all look a little bit different, but it's hard to put into words exactly why it's different. But we suspected something's going on in there. And AI has taught us a lot over the last few years. We can see that, you know, AI can extract your sex out of the ECG. It can, with high confidence, know if it's male or female. It can tell you your age. We have some almost finished work that it can tell you sort of what sport you've played and what sport you probably should have played in high school. It's remarkable. And so we wondered, can VO2 max be extracted from the ECG, this physiological parameter that we think is so essential to health? And so we trained about 2,000 ECGs against gold standard VO2 max measurements that we did right here in the Yaki building next door. We didn't really think it was going to work, but lo and behold, it worked quite well. That you could extract this number from a bunch of squiggly lines, 10-second snapshot in the ECG that you could do in your primary care office. Not only that, it predicted health across the Mass General Brigham system. So we have an integrated healthcare system. We have ECGs that are happening at the Brigham, at the MGH, at New Wellesley. And we noticed that from an ECG done in clinic, we could predict future atrial fibrillation. It's an irregular heart rate that causes stroke. We could predict future heart attack, future heart failure, and death, just as VO2 normally does. But this is just an estimated VO2 from those squiggly lines of the ECG. You know, half of your VO2 comes from you exercising, but the other half you inherit sort of from mom and dad. It has a genetic basis. And it's eluded us in sports science exactly the genes that give some people really high VO2 maxes. And with this technology, and by integrating it with the genetics across the Mass General Brigham system, we're starting to actually get a glimpse of the genes associated with high VO2 max. What are the genes underneath this so-called aerobic engine? Because if we can drug these things, we can not only modify human performance, but each one would be a profound drug that sort of helps the human condition. And with that, I'll end with just a brief story, a story that just came out in the New England Journal earlier this year, of a patient that was sent to us. He was a triathlete. All he noticed was over a course of about 1.5 years, his triathlon times were just getting slower and slower and slower. And a coach, he had his coach in the room with us, and he was like, I've never seen anyone lose fitness this quickly. I crush every single stress test. I've been to the Leahy Clinic, I've been to the Mayo Clinic, I've been to the Cleveland Clinic. I crush all the stress tests. What's wrong with me? And so we put him on the treadmill, and he did a VO2 max study. And a triathlete should usually have a VO2 max in the 40s or 50s, and his was at 19. And so that immediately told us something was wrong. And he was like elated because we could point to it. And he ended up having this blood-based cancer that can affect the heart. And so within 48 hours, he was getting chemotherapy in the Mass General Brigham Cancer Center. And that's not to scare you, but it's just to say that we think that fitness should be paid attention to, that it's a vital sign, and that if we can find ways of ambiently collecting that data, I think we can be able to help members of our community before they recognize it. And so we talked a little bit about sports cardiology, why I think this VO2 max is an important vital sign, and how we're using AI and the ECG to learn more about it. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Antonia. My patient population is very different than yours. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to spend time with us this Monday evening. I'm going to share with you a little bit about A, who I am, B, what I do, and C, what my research is all about, to really give you a glimpse of what all of the different types of care at the Heart Vascular Institute spans. So to begin, Patrick showed a map. I'm going to show a map. This is the great land of Canada up north. You can see Boston down in this little corner. I spend a lot of my time up in Canada in a little town called Stony Creek, which is where my family lives. I did my MD and my PhD at the University of Toronto, and while being there, I remember always, I've shared the story before, always looking at all of the cool studies that were coming out in the world, and they were always coming out from Boston. Always MGH, all of the really breakthrough sciences, and I knew early on this is where I was going to be, and this is where I was going to practice. So I came here for general surgery residency, finished cardiac surgery residency or fellowship, and have now stayed on as a cardiac surgeon. You might ask, what does cardiac surgery look like? Well, it's actually a lot of fun, I think. This is a room in one of our operating rooms, or 45. This is our entire team. We call ourselves the Big Red Machine because it takes so many components to make a surgery successful. Now, we captured this photo on a very special day where we did, I think, was it 4 transplants in one day, which is very cool because it takes about 8 to 10 hours per transplant. And in the middle, I am there, and one of my partners, Dr. Rabi, up on top. And then this is the entire team of perfusionists, anesthesiologists, technicians, students, learners that all contribute. And we, aside from heart transplants and so forth, we do other types of surgeries. And I remember when I was finishing training, trying to figure out what is it that I want to do in surgery. And I really was drawn to this field, not because technically it's excellent and you have huge impacts on patient care, but also from a personal point of view. And I have gotten permission from my family to share this. But this was around the time when I was finishing training, and it was my dad's 60th birthday party. I went back home to Canada. We had a big party. But about a week or two later, he actually had an episode where his heart stopped working. He had to go to the hospital, did fine, in fact, recovered that he started working in the hospital already. But he was diagnosed with heart failure. And for us, this was a huge shock for the family and changed the way we see heart failure, and personally changed my drive to understand this disease process and try to figure out how we can improve it for all of the patients that have it. So what is heart failure? 1 in 5 people will have heart failure in their lifetimes. And if you look at the number of people that get hospitalized, it's the most common reason why we see hospitalizations in the US. And those that get hospitalized with heart failure, about half of them or so are going to go on and pass away because of heart failure within 5 years. So clearly it's an important problem. A lot of people have heart failure, and I don't want you to go away with this being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. There's lots of things we can do for heart failure. People take medicines, some people get a little device placed, and people can generally do quite well. I, on the other hand, treat patients that are in a small minority where they need a heart transplantation. It's a final therapeutic option for these patients that have really severe forms of heart failure. And if you look at how do patients do with heart failure who get a heart transplant, they actually do quite well. This is data up to 2020. Showing that if you look at the hearts that we implant into patients, there's over 90% survival at a year. And while this is very encouraging, if you look at our national list of who is waiting for a heart transplant in the US, there's over 3,000 people, for example, that are waiting for an organ to be donated, which is a huge number when you think about it. And then if you look at 5 years, even though our mortality is really good early on, at 5 years, about 30% or so of these patients have mortality after having a heart transplant. So clearly there's something that's happening that's not allowing our patients to live long, healthy lives with huge VO2 maxes like you're describing. And we know the reason that mortality is high down the road is that there's rejection that happens. And what does rejection mean? Well, if you think about a heart, it's made up of many different cells, which are different components. And we know that as hearts start to reject over time, some of these components can change. And this is really the driver for my research efforts and what I'm really interested in trying to figure out, which is the question, can we figure out what those different changes are with time that cause rejection? I think at the MGH we have a very cool setup where we can actually track these patients with time. Because once you get a heart transplant, every week we biopsy these hearts. It looks something like this. It's quite scary looking, where you go in with this like little claw through the vein and take a little piece of the heart. And we analyze that heart in the pathology lab to figure out who's rejecting, who's not rejecting. And it's actually not that elegant if you think about it. We just look on a microscope and have a guess or a number of is it rejecting or not. But with some of the research that's been happening, we actually have protocols now set in place where we can take that little piece of tissue from the heart and break it up into single components, and thereby look, hey, what's changing in week 1, week 2, week 3, and so forth, to see if we can predict people that are rejecting versus people who are not. This is just a snapshot. I showed you the photo of me in the operating room. This is me in the lab, my technician Ritika. And what we do is we take those biopsies, prepare little suspensions, which are just mixtures of all of the different components, and are then able to read out at the level of single cells or individual components what's changing in these patients over time. I've been on staff for about 1.5 years. We have over 13 people enrolled and over 500 days of data that we're tracking. And we have some of our early results coming in, so there's a busy slide, but it's showing that each of the different colors is a different type of cell or component, and you can see how over time they can change. Some appear, some disappear, and with this we think we're going to be able to show what are the unique components that are important for rejection. I will say this has taken a lot of time to get to, and as far as I know, there's no one else in the US or the world that has something like this shown. And it's exciting for us because we can now be able to draw some of these results from the lab, take them back to the clinical setting, and try to change the way that our patients have outcomes in the heart failure field. And so ultimately, I think we all want to be able to imagine a world where we allow our transplant recipients to live long, healthy lives and tailor therapies that will help them get there. I think it's exciting, and I'm very excited you guys are here, because a lot of this work that we're able to do is because of the donations. Especially as a starting out physician scientist, it's hard to get funding right away. And so a lot of this work that I've done has really been by donated funds, so thank you all very much. And the hope is really to establish ourselves as leaders in the heart transplant and heart failure world as MGH, and give the gift of longer lives and healthier lives to our patients.